Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and I am thrilled to tell you that the Codist is back on the market in print in both paperback and Kindle. You know, we fought a battle and we won. We got the copyright back. We're even talking about a screenplay. This biblical thriller based on the weaponization of DNA. Now, that may not mean much to you right now, but when you think about the fact that the Levitical priest has to be the head of the Sanhedrin to call for the return of Jesus, if you can cut off that line, you stop Jesus from coming back. This is Satan's diabolical plan, and right now in Tehran, Iran, they are working to weaponize DNA of the Levitical priesthood. There is a Y chromosome marker. This is a fascinating story. It's a biblical thriller, and it's back available to you. I also want to introduce you to my newest book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. If you can go to our website, ignitinganation.com, scroll to the bottom of the page, put in your email address. We won't send you spam because spam's not kosher. But we will send you a copy of the first chapter of this book. We're excited to share this story with you of the 7 parts of a tree, beginning with the dirt, the tree of life, found in the Garden of Eden and found again there in the book of Revelation, right there on the river of life. 7 lessons within each, 49 total lessons of God showing us how He shows us things of the supernatural through the things of the natural. This morning I am thrilled to meet and introduce you to Erica Willis, author of the just released book, Believe Boldly, The Power of Simple, Confident Prayer to Unleash the Supernatural. Erica is the founder and director of the Fives, an international prayer ministry. A leader in the local church for over 20 years, she served as a church planter, children's pastor, small group director, and women's ministry director. She teaches weekly in the women's ministry at her church of 2,000, blogs regularly at BelieveBoldly.com, and speaks nationally at women's conferences and events. She and her husband Joey have 2 children and live in Weatherford, Texas. Erica Willis, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thanks so much.
Erica, you are a prayer warrior. You believe in unleashing the supernatural, in grabbing a hold of the words of Jesus in Luke 10:18 and Luke 10:19, where He says, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. I give you, Erica Willis, you, our listening audience, our viewing audience, the power to overcome, to trample on snakes and scorpions and overcome all the power of the enemy, that nothing whatsoever shall harm us. You must have been one bold child growing up in one bold church to grab a hold of this lesson. Is that who little Erica was?
Absolutely. Even my mother growing up said, you know, you are really a great leader, was her sweet way of saying it. And she said, but you could be really mean sometimes to get your way. So I kind of look back on my childhood and feel a little bit for my mom trying to raise this little fireball of personality in this tiny body that she probably thought, Lord, help me. What is this girl going to turn into someday? It's either going to be really fantastic and great, or it's going to be a disaster. There was never going to be an in-between.
Well, you didn't grow up in Texas. As a matter of fact, you had to start dealing with a phenomenon that I had to deal with when I moved from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to Atlanta, and that's, it's one word, and it's called sweet tea.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, it's a whole new world that I did not understand until I met my husband, Joey, who was born and raised in Texas, and his mom makes a killer sweet tea. And what I found when I moved here is that everyone makes a killer sweet tea, and that I have to specifically ask for the unsweetened version anytime I go anywhere, and they look at me like I'm crazy. So I don't know that I'll ever fully grasp the passion that they have for sweet tea, but I can appreciate it in small doses.
Go back to the kind of environment that you were raised in. You know, your mom recognized in you that leadership, that drive, that spirit-filled power, even as a young girl. How was that guided? Was it a faith-based home? Was it a strong church connection? where were your mentors? Where did they come from, and how have they played out in the publishing of this book? When you look back and you see and kind of inventory, which all of us as authors do, many things come to our remembrance of people who played a role in our life and spoke words that we go, oh my goodness, I never realized that's what that person was saying 50 years ago.
Right, right. That's a great question. While my family believed in God, I would not say that we were professing Christians by any means. We were definitely more the Sunday morning Christian, check the box, be good people, make good choices, be kind to others. So I really believe that my mom, in the wisdom that she had, in the way that she walked with the Lord, just tried to nurture that I would be true to myself. That if I'm called to be bold, that I should be bold. And there wasn't necessarily a weaving in of faith in that, or letting the Lord lead that, which caused some hard roads in my growing up to learn what it meant to submit to the Lord and what he had for me. But I would say that rather than being mentored into this way that God wanted me to walk into, he taught me through the lack of. So one of the things that as I prayed a ton about what this book would be about, and God revealed to me that it would be prayer, I honestly was shocked and said, God, I feel like you've gifted me in so many other areas that I've led, and I don't feel like prayer is one of them. And it was almost like he was pointing out the obvious that anyone else would point out that I couldn't see for myself because I was so embedded in it. And he took me on this journey all the way back to when I was little, when I remember being in kindergarten and praying every single day that I would be perfect. I remember saying, God, I don't want to mess up today. I want to make all the right choices. And then at night I would lay in bed and I would tick through my mind where I had messed up and where I had done well. And that's kind of what my faith was in the beginning. And then as an 8th grader, so about 12, 13 years old, is when I accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior. And it lit a fire inside of me that I still to this day can only see as the favor of God, that I've just hit the ground running from then. And I came home with this passion in a family that knew nothing of passion for the Lord. And I started praying every single night for my family to come to salvation. And I remember for at least a year and a half, I would cry in my bed every single night, passionate prayers for my family to come to know Jesus. And when God started to show me that thread of continuance through my life of how prayer has changed and shaped me, it wasn't necessarily that someone held my hand and walked me through it. It was because there was no one doing that my prayers were passionately focused to see change, to see movement. And God was faithful to see that come about in my family, which was an incredible experience.
So you saw at a young age, in your teenage years, the prayers being answered as you interceded, which was confirmation for you that God was listening even to a child.
Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting because I never shared those stories. They were so personal to me, and I didn't feel safe in my home environment to kind of come out with the Jesus message, since not that my family would have been anti that, but it wasn't an atmosphere that was welcoming and asking questions about how are you hearing from the Lord. And so when I shared those in later years, my stepmother said, I always wondered why we ended up going to church. There was a random flyer that came in the mail one day, and we just thought, hey, why don't we check this out? And from there was this ripple effect throughout my family of how each came to know Christ and really seek him. And she said, now I know where that came from, because it was so out of character for them. It was cool for her to connect the dots and say, I see where God used prayer from you to usher this into your entire family.
So she really became a collaborator on this journey, because she was able to share with you and have you see how in those quiet moments. It takes me to 2 Samuel 14:14. It says, like water falls to the ground and does not return, we all must die. But God does not desire that. He devises ways for those who are estranged from him to return.
Yes.
Now, isn't it interesting that, this is deep in the story of King David and deep in the story of the Old Testament, that the God of heaven 24/7 has his own list of those he's called to be his own, and that he'll use the prayers of a child, he'll use the prayers of a gym teacher, he'll use the prayers of a distant aunt or uncle or a friend of the family that you don't even know because they're so embedded in their church or in their faith walk. that all of us will be surprised as who will be waiting for us, who will see. I often tell people that there'll be just as many people you'll be surprised to see in heaven as will be surprised to see you.
Truth. Yes. It really does take a village. And I think that's something that God, again, has been revealing to me over the years, that my grandmother is a very devout Catholic, and she modeled praying consistently to me at a young age. We actually had a house fire when I was growing up, and my brother, who was 3 at the time, was badly burned. And we stayed with her for a few months while we renovated our home, and she kind of became my second mom for those months. And she would take me to mass, and we would light a candle, and we would pray for my brother. And it was incredible to see the community that came out of that. I remember receiving bags of groceries and cards and love from people who I obviously didn't even know as a small child, but just to see different people be the hands and feet of God through prayer, and then also tangibly that helped our family. I think it's been a powerful experience for my life to launch from there.
So you saw on one aspect of this prayer, another aspect of this community, and you were able to finally put it all together and realized it was because of a personal relationship with the Messiah that brought all this to come to pass, that brought not just your family to faith, but brought a complete transformation in your relationships with your family, their understanding of this boldness that you had, this fierce boldness that someone might say to a 7-year-old child that they were mean. But this was really your bold faith, that you were driven to develop and build and grow in this relationship. How did that begin to play out as you went through high school and into college? And how did you develop your circle of friends? Because once you leave that really comfortable cocoon of being surrounded by the familiar, being surrounded by the routine of church life and church group and youth pastor and that environment, once you get to step out of it, then you begin to make your own choices based on all of then the floodgates open, and a wash of opportunity comes upon you.
That's so true. What I felt like, I honestly feel like I had a support group within high school in my youth group that I attended, and but at the school level, I almost felt like I was at the forefront of pushing the envelope of more faith, being bolder, being more vocal about your convictions. So I don't know that my school felt like a safe place, even though I know God protecting me from a lot of things. I went to a very small school in Kansas, and so there was a lot of shelter in that in itself. But I always felt like I was on the cutting edge. So I was more excited to go to Christian college than I was to continue a high school career, because that was the world. And I felt like once I step into Christian college, it'll be so different. And what I found is that it wasn't different. It's the same kids that are in high school that maybe feel a call to ministry and are growing in that gift, but maybe haven't arrived yet. So what I found was that I found a man and I got married quickly. And then we went into full-time ministry. So I did get married very young. I went through 3 years of school, but I was married by 21, and my husband and I both felt called to full-time ministry. So it was almost like I was continuously looking to the next thing that would feel like the comfortable place. High school didn't feel as comfortable, so maybe college would. College didn't feel as comfortable, so maybe ministry would. And ministry, when I stepped into it full-time, found out quickly that that's also not a comfortable place.
So you bring up a very good point. Is there ever supposed to be a comfortable place, or did God design us to have a deeper desire for more of Him, less of ourselves, and this conflict that wars within us? You know, Paul talked about, I do what I ought not to do, and what I ought to do, I don't do. We have this constant friction inside of us. And the more we draw into this truly supernatural relationship, it's with the unseen, it's with the known but unknown, because God is mysterious in so many ways. You know, the Bible tells us everything, but it doesn't tell us all things.
Right. So for me, I call it a holy discontent. And what I found with the journey of prayer and what God has called me to in this book that I share a lot in the book about is this concept of I was stepping out of my comfort zone spiritually to experience new things that God had for me that I either mistrusted or had never experienced for myself. So I had a hard time understanding how to encounter those things. And then once I stepped into those new things, that became my new comfortable. And so God said, Erica, I know you feel like you're on the precipice of all these amazing new things that I've done in you and that you're still pushing the envelope, but you're not, because now you're comfortable in the newness of these gifts that I've received. And I have more for you. I have more in the next. So don't get comfortable here, because there's always the next. There's always a holy discontent that says, I don't have enough of God. I want more of God. God, whatever you have for me, I give it all back. Whatever it is that you have planned for me, I want that. So that for me has been a struggle to not get comfortable in the newness. What used to be weird is no longer weird for me. So God, I ask for more. I ask for more of whatever you have for me.
Years ago, I preached, and I've been asked to preach this message in many churches, and it's called The Other Side of Breakthrough.
Yes.
And our blessing is always on the other side of breakthrough. But if you think about a motel with lots and lots and lots of rooms, you know how the old highway, alongside the highway motel were just a chain of rooms. And you start out in one room and you work your way across the room and you hit the wall. Mm-hmm. And you break through, and your blessings on the other side of breakthrough. Maybe there's a prize, maybe there's something waiting for you. And then you realize that across the room there's another wall.
Right.
And you spend a certain amount of time enjoying maybe the recovery, maybe the discovery, then the recovery of the strength to want to go across that room and see what's on the other side of the next breakthrough, and what blessing. And this is our walk with the Lord, that instead of us cursing the obstacle, we are to bless and embrace the obstacle, because our blessing is on the other side of breakthrough. Now, in a part of your book, you actually say that you describe yourself as just spiritual enough to never grow another day in your life, that you saw the early church as a model for us to walk in the power of the Holy Spirit, but you weren't seeing that and I want to make sure that our audience always understands is that these are not condemnation or criticism of today's churches or today's pastors or today's seminaries. We're talking about the individual's relationship with God. It is not the church's responsibility to foster your relationship with God. It is your responsibility to foster your relationship with God. A shepherd doesn't go out and pull the grass up and individually feed it to every sheep one at a time until they're saturated and he's worked himself into a complete fatigue, because he's always pulling grass and one at a time he can feed. He's going to feed the flock, all right, and lay out the pasture for them and lead them to greener pastures, and then say, now spend time here growing, getting fatter, getting stronger, getting woollier, getting hairier, and then guess what's going to happen in a season? We're going to come along with these shears and we're going to take everything off and we're going to start the process all over again. But you're to be smarter, wiser, more mature, more open to receiving. And you found yourself, it's interesting, you said that for a long time in your own life you dismissed words of knowledge and dreams from the Lord as unbiblical. Like who's talking to me, and how can I trust that?
Yeah, that's good. Well, I found that in the latest leadership that God had me in during the time of the story that I'm telling about, I was the furthest ahead in my faith and was never going to grow another day. The focus of our church plant was to reach out to people who had been hurt or wounded by the church, or were, arms crossed. I have no interest in hearing what you have to say about Jesus. So everything we did was very filtered through that. How can we present this in such a way that we shepherd their heart well, but we also present them with the truth. So a lot of people that I was leading within the church were people that were new Christians, new in their faith. And so when I would meet with them and hear a word from the Lord, or just, what I would call like, I just feel like, or God is doing something in me. I couldn't quite say it, but every time I would deliver that, they would affirm it, or they would break into tears, or God showed me that, this is really a powerful thing. But what I noticed is that the other people around me were not experiencing that. So I thought, wow, I must have arrived, right? In my ignorance and in my infancy, I'm looking at this evidence in my life thinking, man, I must really be doing something right here, because I hear so clearly from the Lord and it seems like no one else is. So I'm feeling pretty good about myself, right? So I let pride slip in and say, man, you're doing so great at this Christian thing. How about we just sit right here where it feels really good and you're affirmed and you hear from God, but don't do anything weird or crazy, because you don't want to scare those people that are far from God and have been hurt by the church in the past. So I just found myself safe and comfortable in that space. And so when we made the change and moved to Texas, we knew God had more for us, but he had not clearly identified what the more was. I felt like he was ripping me out of everything that had established me. I was finally working for a church, doing the thing I loved. These women that I poured into each week as the heads of our children's ministry, they were my heartbeat. I mean, we poured our heart and soul into that ministry. And when God called us away to come to Texas, I literally had no vision for what was next in my life. And I just felt like God was taking away everything from me that was good. Like, God, I'm hearing from you. God, I'm leading people. God, I'm being so faithful. Why would you yank this from me? And what I found is that he had to get me out of that comfortable place to go to a church that nurtured the concepts of hearing from the Lord. And they would use work terminology like that, like a word of knowledge. And I thought, what in the world is that? You mean this weird feeling I'm getting, or this thing I'm hearing in my head? That's a God thing. That's not just me, having some intuition or being a good friend. Like, that has a word. And I specifically remember along this journey, I used to have spiritual dreams all the time, and I didn't know it. So about halfway through that process, after praying to receive them, I kept saying, well, I kind of got this mental image, and God would say, that was a vision, or that was a spiritual dream. I need you to say what it is, because that's the truth of it. Stop beating around the bush, because the words make you uncomfortable, because the truth of what it is never going to change. So just call it like it is. And so for me, that was a huge step, just to say, okay, I need to submit something to you. I had a vision of this. Like, that was in itself groundbreaking for my faith.
Well, it's amazing that we can easily identify with children when they say they have growing pains. Mm-hmm. This is the symbol of spiritual growing pains, and growth. First of all, the process of birth is painful, yeah. But spiritual growth can be painful, but it really is, oddly, it hurts so good.
Yeah, correct.
So very strange kind of, I don't want to get into this, that sounds masochistic, but truly, if every day we're growing in the Lord, we're being stretched. And when you stretch something to the point of where it feels like you're going to break, that's where God comes and reinforces, and he adds to the fabric. And that's why we find that strength that we find, and we become even bolder and more emboldened. We've been talking with Erica Willis, author of the brand new released book, Believe Boldly, The Power of Simple, Confident Prayer to Unleash the Supernatural. If you feel or have felt, or feel right now like Erica has felt, and you felt that you were the odd one, that you found you were comfortable in your comfort, and God is pulling you to something more, but you don't know how to get there. You don't have a roadmap. You don't have a plan. You need to really see it through someone else's eyes before you can experience it for yourself, because there's all kinds of new terminology and all kinds of new understanding and all kinds of questions that you have. This book answers those questions for you. It allows you to see through the eyes of one that was so sure and so strong, but steeped in comfort. And God had to stretch, not break, because God's not the breaker, but He gives us a breaker spirit to break strongholds. We know that Jesus came to bind up the brokenhearted and set the captive free. You know, we always talk about captive to sin, but captive to complacency, captive to a unrich and unrewarding prayer life, captive to an unbelief in the power of God to heal, the power of God to protect, the power of God to intercede, the power of God to answer yes and amen. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to dig into more of Believe Boldly, the power of simple, confident prayer to unleash the supernatural with Erica Willis. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere, and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Erica Willis, author of the newly released book, Believe Boldly, The Power of Simple, Confident Prayer to Unleash the Supernatural. Erica, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Erica, you run a program called The Fives. That's one of the, in your bio, it was mentioned. And what is that?
Yeah, so the Fives is a unique creature that God just grew from organic need to hear from him better. Like I mentioned before, we were in Kansas City. My husband was, we were helping plant a church. He was kind of on, not on staff, but at a lay leader level, helping do that as kind of like an associate pastor role. He was also working full-time for a bank and going to school full-time, and we had two small children at home. So our schedule was completely packed, and I was working part-time for the church as well. So his pastor at the time challenged him as a friend and said, hey, how about you and I and one other man get up early in the morning and pray for an hour, and we'll keep each other accountable via text. And my husband brought that idea to me, and I was not excited about it at first, because all I could think was, there are so many things that we're trying to do right now, and you're going to add another thing to our plate. This sounds like a horrible idea. You're going to be exhausted every night. This prayer thing is not going to be great. Maybe we could do it later in the day. But he went ahead and did it because he knows better than I did. And what I began to see in my husband was this transformation, that all the things I had prayed for him started happening without me saying a word. And what I noticed was that this early morning prayer time was doing something in him. This hour with the Lord started to radically change him. So much so that I looked at him and said, I want that. Whatever it is that's happening, I want to be a part of that. So I started to do it alongside him, and we'd both get up at 5 in the morning and we would pray for an hour. And that is what moved our shift from Kansas City to Texas for the next that God had for us. So when we made that change and I was in Texas, no longer having the accountability that I had prior, I posted on my blog the story of how I was getting up at 5 in the morning and that how it had changed my life. And I had a friend reach out to me, Renee Dresser, and she said, hey, I really need this accountability in my life. Would you mind if we get up and text each other to make sure that we're up at 5 and we can just share our thoughts back and forth? And we added a few friends to that, and we call it the Fives because it's 5 days a week, Monday through Friday at 5 a.m. for 5 weeks long. So we did the session, we called it a session for 5 weeks with 9 of us in the very first group. And what we found is that the life change was so radical that all of these women shared with their friends. So the next time we did one, we had a group of about 25. And then the next one we did was in the 40s, and the next one was in the 70s. And this thing that was just my heart's cry of wanting more of God, wanting to hear from him better than I ever had, turned into something that I couldn't have orchestrated or planned on my own. So since that, it has grown over the past 3 years. This current session, today is actually the last day of the session that we just finished. We had 725 people participating that they just check in each morning via the GroupMe app. We give them the tools they need to start prayer, but we don't hold their hand through it. So we give them some scripture, we give them some thoughts to reflect on during their prayer time, but how they spend that hour is completely up to them. And we've just seen incredible fruit from that. We are in all time zones in the U.S., and we have several overseas groups as well. And all we've done along the way is say, okay, God, it's bigger now, and we can't do this. Send us more people to help, send us more leaders, send us more coaches so that we can continue to help this grow the way that you want it to.
So if somebody watching right now would want to plug into this concept of the Fives, what would they do?
They would visit my website, believeboldly.com, and on there they'll find information about the Fives. The next group that we'll have will probably be in the fall, but until then, if they sign up for our newsletter, they'll be notified that when our next session is starting.
In your book, you share something that is highly controversial, highly misunderstood, highly, how do I want to say this? Highly misrepresented.
Mm.
When people ask me what I am, because I was raised in a Jewish home and came to faith at 44, I tell them I'm a Pentecostal, charismatic, spirit-filled Jew.
Mm-hmm.
That's who I am. And you share a story of how you received what you called your first heavenly prayer language. Now, I want to make sure that people understand the distinction between a prayer language and speaking in tongues. Now, the world has taken these two together and merged them into some evidence of salvation, or in some circles, if you don't have it, then you don't got it.
Mm-hmm.
It makes people question. In God's Word, God says, I hear you, when you don't know what to pray, I hear you through your utterances. All right, utterances are spoken, and your groanings are out of your belly. It's out of your belly that you groan. How did this happen? What does it mean? And what have you seen with your own eyes and your own experience, a change in stealing Satan's ability to rob you of your prayer?
That's such a great question. What I felt like in reflection after receiving my prayer language that I didn't realize that I had done is that I had made a judgment call about what a prayer language was, or speaking in tongues, because I put the two together, what that was, having never seen it. I had never seen it in person. I was taught to guard my doctrine closely. And to me, that meant shutting off things rather than examining them with an open heart and letting the Holy Spirit interpret for me what those things meant. So I had already conceived in my mind that a prayer language, or what I considered the same thing, is that people who in their zeal lose control of themselves and want to have attention. So they stand in front of a church and they speak this babbling words, and then someone else who wants attention in the church stands up and says, oh, I know exactly what they just said. That was my filter for what this gift was. And I didn't feel like in the Bible I felt there was adequate support to believe that this was a gift that still existed. And then I read a book called The God I Never Knew by Robert Morris, and he did such a fantastic job of applying the Word of God to the truth to support that these gifts were still around. So once I was confronted with scripture after scripture after scripture, I said, oh man, I got to figure out what this is all about, because maybe I've been missing it this whole time. So in my struggle, I reached out to people around me who I knew claimed to have a prayer language, and that I knew I could trust and that I respected, and that God had proven them trustworthy. And I said, hey, I'm really struggling with this. I've always felt this way about it, but I feel like maybe God's trying to show me something new. Can you share with me your experience? And what I came to find out was that it was scary for a lot of them to step into this gift, because it is so out front and in front of people when they are delivering a word in tongues to the church. And just that in itself, being spoken, broke something in my heart that I thought, oh man, I've been judging these people that I've never even seen deliver a word and assumed what their heart was. So when I finally got over all of those things, I went to God and said, God, I don't understand how I can form words with my mouth that I don't first form in my mind. It doesn't comprehend. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm a very logical person. I want to hear those words prior and then I'll speak them. But to just open my mouth, I'm not sure about that. So I come to a place of surrender. God, whatever you want to show me, I'm open to it. I'm not quite sure where I land, but if it's something you have for me, then I receive it. And God woke me up at midnight one night and said, come out and pray. And so I left my cozy bed and I went out my living room and just got on my face before God and just praying over my day. I wasn't exactly sure what he wanted to share with me. But he brought up this concept of a prayer language. And he said, Erica, what if I want to give you that? And I said, I'll receive it, God, whatever you have for me. And he just gave me a syllable sound in my mind. And no one else is in the room. I'm all by myself. So there was no fear for me of, am I going to show off? Am I here just to get attention? Those things that were deep-rooted fears from the very beginning, God completely got rid of those for this experience. And he gave me just a syllable. And he said, open your mouth and just say this. And when I did, it was like the floodgates opened and I was speaking words I was not forming in my mind first. And I was able to stop it, which shocked me because I felt like this would be an encounter that I'm just taken over by the Holy Spirit and there's no say when I start or when I stop. And I was able to stop it. And then I was able to start it again as the Holy Spirit prompted. And it was just a beautiful experience for me and the Lord that no one else was a part of, that God has used since then to usher in healing for other people. He gives me visions while praying in my prayer language so that I have some type of interpretation of what I'm praying for. And I've noticed that the power that is harnessed within those prayers has been above and beyond anything I've ever experienced before.
There's two things I want to share with you that will make you understand this even more. You made the statement, words I didn't form in my mind. Okay? Mm-hmm. In the Hebrew, there's no word for brain. Because it says, so a man thinks in his heart. Mm-hmm. It's out of the abundance of the heart that the mouth speaks.
So great.
We've become so natural, and because we don't have a command of much of the Old Testament as really believers should, they don't understand that there is no word for mind, there is no word for brain in the Hebrew language. And therefore in the Bible, when Jesus says to the Pharisees, you wash the outside of the cup, but the inside of the cup, that's what's dirty. You need to clean that because it's out of the abundance of the heart that your mouth speaks.
Right.
Well, this idea of a prayer language, Satan is the wisest and the most beautiful of God, all God's celestial creation, not his human creations, his celestial creation. And language is for the purpose of confusion. This was the curse at Babel.
Right? Yes.
Now, here's a language that God gives you, that God says, I'm giving this to you, and even, O great covering cherub, O morning star, he can't understand.
Yes.
Now, here you out on a deserted island, all right, and you decide you're going to build a signal fire. You know that there's an enemy looking for you, and you know there's a rescue team looking for you. And who's going to get to you first? So you light a signal fire, not realizing that you've just told the enemy where you are. Your prayer language is a signal fire that the enemy cannot see.
I love it.
Only God can see that signal fire and that cry, and that he is the rescuer that comes when he sees and hears that signal fire. And if people put it in perspective, because yes, Satan does steal your prayers. Job said very clearly, that which I feared the most has come upon me. He spoke of his fears. Well, if I want the enemy to know how to get to me, all I have to do is say, let me tell you what I'm afraid of. He doesn't even have to work at it.
Yeah.
I've just told him, here's my fear. So that which I fear the most has come upon me. We speak life or death with the tongue.
Yes.
It's all of this is scriptural. Now, the healings that you've seen, the supernatural, and I want to talk about the supernatural because I do healing services. I had a man paralyzed 9 years, confined to a wheelchair, no feeling whatsoever in his legs, broken bone in his neck, and was told he would never walk again. And I was able to lay hands on him. I felt bones move. It freaked me out. beyond any comprehension. And he literally said to his wife, step forward, I'm going to stand up. And she said, you can't. He said, don't say I can't. And he stood up and he turned around and he pushed his wheelchair away. And he walked over to a chair and he pulled up his pant leg and he said, I want you to see how atrophied my legs are, that they're not even capable of supporting weight. And he pulled up his right pant leg and he showed me a perfectly formed leg. And he said, well, maybe it was the other leg.
Right?
And there's a guy's 9 years in a wheelchair. He knows what his legs look like. He pulls up his other leg, it's perfectly formed. He became my head usher.
Wow. Wow.
So I've seen, experienced. I used to wear hearing aids. I was going deaf. I had what's called Meniere's syndrome. It's incurable. And I was diagnosed with it in the 80s. I was fitted with hearing aids, and progressively the power of the hearing aids went greater and greater and greater to try to compensate for the hearing loss. But I was told that ultimately I would go completely deaf. So there's a picture of me with my newborn baby, my adopted baby, laying on my chest, and these large hearing aids protruding from my ear. Then somebody laid hands on me and prayed for me, and I took the hearing aids out and put them in a box and never put them back in my ears.
Wow.
I have absolutely zero hearing loss, just had my hearing checked again, and my hearing is absolutely perfect at 66 years old. I'm not going deaf. I'm hearing even more clearly than I ever heard before. So this is the power that you're talking about, believing boldly. We've allowed doubt, and doubt becomes a weed, and that grows in the soul and chokes out the very life. You're now living in Texas. You know what kudzu is, and you know what these spreading weeds that take over just entire forests, and they're covered with these vines. You've seen it. You say that you walk with God more closely now, and He started to convict you about your habits and your hobbies and lifestyle, and really did a work in you. Do you think that's because of who you were, or is that available to everybody?
Absolutely. I think it's available to everyone. When we doubt what it is that God is doing in us, like you said, we're not going to be able to walk in the power of the Holy Spirit. And one of the things that caused a ton of doubt, like I said, I wouldn't even call what I saw in my mind a vision, because one minute I would see a vision that seemed from the Lord, biblical, applied to the situation I was in. And the next moment I was replaying a scene in my mind from a show that I watched the night before. So the struggle was, God, I see all sorts of things in my mind. How do I know what is from you and what is not from you? And He said, if you will clean what's coming into your mind, you'll be able to tell the difference. So for me, God started to transform and convict me about everything. I mean, music, TV shows, who my friends were and what they said to me, what I said to other people, these things that become a megaphone in our ears to communicate to us when we are not actually doing them. We're replaying them in our minds later, as we're getting ready for bed or as we're taking our kids to school. We let that take mind space. And what I found is when I started pulling those things out, getting rid of those weeds, I was able to have fresh soil so that God, when God planted something in my mind, I knew for sure that it was from Him. And I was able to say in confidence and boldly to a friend, I feel like the Lord has said this. Can I submit this to you from the Holy Spirit? And when I saw God prove Himself over and over and over that these words I was giving were received by them, then I had more confidence and there was less doubt. And so I would say, okay, God, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? A spiritual dream? Do you have a prayer language? What do you want me to do, God, to be the perfect vessel that you have called me to be? And so some of those instances were, specifically I talk about in the book, praying for healing over a small boy. And when I was actually on vacation, and I was in this room that we were staying in, and 3 times that morning I had got a vision in my mind of putting anointing oil on my hands and anointing something. And I just sat in that and said, okay, God, I don't know what you're trying to show me, but I'm just going to trust that you'll reveal the next steps. And a few hours later, I was sitting with my host chatting about life. And she said out of the blue, I have a friend that I need you to pray over her son. He's very, very sick. And when she said that, it was like the Holy Spirit brought back to mind the vision I had had that morning about putting anointing oil on and praying for this boy. And God opened the door for us to go and pray over him. And it's kind of like the story that you just expressed. My husband was there as well as some friends, and the small boy had problems with his knees, intense pain in his knees. And when they laid hands on his knees and we prayed, they said they could feel snapping and popping and movement under their hands, even though this boy was not moving an inch. The kid was almost, came across as so peaceful, it was almost comatose, just sitting there, not moving. And for a little 5-year-old, 6-year-old boy, that's pretty much impossible. So they were able to see that. Now that's part of the testimony, is he is completely pain-free in his knees still to this day. God did a mighty work. So by him showing me a vision, confirming it through a friend, giving me the boldness to step up to pray for that, I was able to step away and say, okay, God, I'm now even bolder that I can hear your voice, that I can see visions from you, that you are powerful to move when we're faithful to follow through on our end. And that just, it's like this cyclical effect, that it just keeps rolling and compounding and making us stronger and bolder in that, which has been an amazing experience.
Well, it is, I am a believer, and I completely and 100% endorse what it is you're sharing with us. We've been talking with Erica Willis, author of Believe Boldly, The Power of Simple, Confident Prayer to Unleash the Supernatural. God has given you dominion back. We lost it in the Garden of Eden. But before Jesus left, he spoke it to his disciples and said, I have given you the authority. If you are a disciple of Jesus Christ, you have that authority. If you do not exercise it, that's a choice you make. But if you're not experiencing the supernatural, if you're not seeing having life-changing experiences in your own heart, in your own mind, and it begins with you. If you want change in your life, your prayer must be, Lord, let there be change, but let it begin with me. Do a supernatural work in me, yes, that I might see clearly how to intercede on behalf of others. Because if there's something blocking me and you, clear the way, prepare the way, let me choose the way that's the clear path to you so that I can be the vessel that you want me to be, to believe boldly, to pray, see, and unleash the supernatural. Erica Willis, thank you so much for being with us and sharing this on Revealing the Truth.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
God bless you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.